Hey gang, Jane back with another installment of my color journal. This is the second video in this series, so if you missed the very first one, you can find the link for that one down below. In that video, I share a bit about why I started this color journal series, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already. So in today's video, I'll be sharing more color tips as we work through 5 new colorways for my squares. And the theme this time is, well, you guessed it, holiday colors. That's what's been dominating my hook lately. So for those of you watching this in the future, I did record this about a month before Christmas. So you'll see a lot of festive reds, greens, and whites. Remember, the links for the original square tutorials will be in the description below. So first we're going to dive straight into the squares, and then I'll share a handy little trick that I use to keep my colors organized when I'm working with a bunch of different colors and a bunch of different squares. This is how I keep track of what color is in what square. Okay, let's get started. The first square today is the daisy square. You'll see this one in a lot of different colors, and this one is in a muted holiday tone. So the first color that we have here is going to be my putty by Impeccable. I get that at Michael's. The next color is Sphagnum, which is a moss green. It has a golden color to it, also Impeccable. The third color is Redwood Heather, one of my faves, and that's Bernat Super Value. It has a little fleck. And the fourth one is Honey, also Bernat Super Value, a nice golden tone. So the order of the colors for this one are, the first round is in the putty, the second round is in the sphagnum, third round I go back to putty just to draw out the center and give a little space between the red and the green. Fourth round I move to the red, and that's kind of the flower round, so the daisy in this case would be a red. The fifth round is the squaring round, and I go back to the putty to frame my flower. And then the sixth round, I move to D. This is the first time I've used the honey. So it gives you a golden colored border. Then round 7 is the sphagnum, and round 8 is back to putty. So those are border rounds, and they pull the colors out from the flower itself, and that gives you a really nice framed piece. Next up, we have the Mandala square, or the Mandala square. We say it differently. This one I have 6 colors in. The first one is Claret by Impeccable. That's their nice rich red. The second one is Soft Taupe, also by Impeccable. Third one is a nice bright white by Red Heart Super Saver. Fourth one is Medium Time by Red Heart Super Saver, so it's a little more of a blue-green. Then we have Burgundy by Bernat Super Value, a deeper red. And finally we have Putty by Impeccable. So that burgundy in there is, you have to be careful between brands. There's also a burgundy that Red Heart puts out, and it looks more like the Claret. So when I give you the color names, make sure you look also at the brand name because they are different between the brands. So the order of the colors, and again, like I said, I've got 6 of them going on here just to give it lots of variety. I start with the Claret, the nice bold red center, almost like Rudolph's nose. And then we move to a nice soft taupe to frame that. It almost looks like a little bit of the center of a flower. And then I move to the nice bright white, and that's in round 3. Then we go back to the soft taupe in round 4, just to reflect the one in round 2. And then we move to the petals of the flower, which I did in the medium time. So it's kind of a nice green floral look, which is kind of a Christmas idea there. And then to frame that green, I went to a burgundy color. So I went a little darker than the red just to be different, I guess. So now we're moving on to round 7, and I did that in putty. So that's so that there's a bit of a balance between the stark white and this border of the flower. Then moving on to round 8, we have a nice thin single crochet border that goes around the entire mandala, and I did that medium time, the green, to reflect the petals of the flower. So then we move to the squaring rounds. Round 9 and round 10 are both done in the Claret, so you have a nice bold red frame. And then finally rounds 11 and 12 are the borders with that single crochet chain one I like to do. So round 11 is the stark white to reflect the white on round 3. And then round 12 is the soft taupe, just to kind of give it a nice soft ending. I usually don't go more than 3 or 4 colors per square themselves, but when I do something like this and I put in 6 colors, I'm actually using colors that just reflect each other or are different shades of each other, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So the burgundy is just a deeper shade of the Claret, and I have a white and a putty, and then the soft taupe, I got 3 neutrals in there. It just gives it more depth, I find. But you got to be careful not to put too many colors in. Sometimes that can get really busy and you lose the design. Our next square is the Sage square, and it's another one with a lot of rounds in it, but I didn't go with as many colors this time. So we have only 4 colors, and they're the 4 I'm using for a lot of my holiday designs. First color is Putty by Impeccable. Second color is Burgundy by Red Heart Super Saver. So this is the burgundy that's more like a red than that deep dark burgundy. Then we have the Sphagnum, which is that moss green. It's a golden green. I happen to have a lot of it, so I tend to use it, and that's Impeccable. And then I have the Winter White by Bernat Super Value. So that's not quite as stark of a bright white. It has a little softer look to it, but it's still white. So let's look at the colors for this one. I start with the Putty, and it's one of my neutrals, but it's not as stark and white, so I want it to be different than the Petals. So we have Putty in round 1. Round 2, we move to the red, which is Burgundy, Red Heart. And then round 3, we move to the green, the Sphagnum. So right off the bat, you've got 3 of the colors right there. And then round 4, we do the petals of this flower, and I do them in the white, like a snowflake kind of thing. Round 5, we move back to Burgundy. That's a border on the petals. And round 6 is also a border. So it's got a double border on the petals. Round 5, I used the red, and round 6, I used the green. So then round 7, I go back to Putty. And round 7 and 8 are the 2 rounds that I use to square it out. So they create the frame for the flower. So if you're really putting some detail into your flower, it's nice to do a solid frame for it. And often when I square on these hexagons, it takes 2 rounds for me to square, so they end up being the same color. Now we move on to round 9, and we're into the border round. So round 9 is a single crochet, so it's a solid red, and that pulls out any of the red in the flower. Then round 10, we move to the Winter White, so I'm pulling the petals out in that one. Round 11, we go to the green, and now we're getting into the texture stitch here on the borders. So it kind of pops on top of the white. And then round 12, we did Burgundy. So I'm actually doing a solid edge border. So instead of going back to the white, which I do sometimes, I think in the original I did, this one I stuck with the red. And then the next round is also red. Round 13 with the textured border is also red. So those final 2 rounds are a solid color and give a really bold border to this square. So now we're moving on to the Happy Petal, and I only have 5 colors in this one because they are 5 solid sections. So the first color that we have here is going to be the Caramel by Bernat Premium, a nice amber color. The second one is Parchment by Bernat Premium, and that's just a little off-white, tends towards the rosy. Then we have Sphagnum, that moss green by Impeccable. And then we have Clay, which is Bernat Super Value. It's a little bit deeper than the off-white. And then we have that nice redwood that I like by Bernat Super Value. So when I say they're by, like Sphagnum by Impeccable, Impeccable is the name of the yarn. It's actually by Loops and Threads, which is actually a Michaels brand. So now we look at the order of these. The first round we have A, which is the caramel. That's the center of our flower. Then we go to round 2, which is B, and that's technically the petals, and that's done in parchment. So it's a little bit of an off-white color. Round 3 is Sphagnum. So I'm surrounding my flower with green. So round 3 and 4 work together, and they are both Sphagnum. So I'm squaring out my flower, and again, I'm doing a little border first, and then I square it out. In this case, I made them the same color. Then I go to rounds 5 and 6 and did them in the same color. They're done in the clay, and they create a border around the square, and it's a nice solid one. And then rounds 7 and 8 are the final rounds of border, and I did them in Redwood Heather. So this one's a pretty simple square because you're doing 2 rounds of each color once you get past the flower, and it gives a nice, simple, but bold statement, and it would look really good in a blanket if you just kind of mixed up the colors a little bit. And our 5th square today is called the Wispy Willow Hexagon, and if you're watching this as I release this, this pattern has not been released yet. It's going to be out this week though, because this is my holiday one. So the story on this square, because every square I make has a story, I wanted to make a tree skirt, and I wanted to make it out of a hexagon. And I decided the Wispy Willow was a really cool square, but it's a square, not a hexagon. So I did a little square magic, and voila, we have the Wispy Willow Hexagon. So with this one, I use 4 main Christmas colors that I really love to use. The first one is the Putty, and that's Impeccable that you can get at Michael's. The second one is Winter White by Bernat, and that's Super Value. and that's a nice soft white. So then we have the Burgundy by Red Heart Super Saver. That's a nice bold red. And finally we have Medium Time by Red Heart Super Saver. This one is not as golden as that Sphagnum. So the Medium Time has a touch more of a blue tone to the green, and it's a really pretty one as well. So the order of the colors in this particular hexagon are: round 1, I started with the putty, the off-white color, and then round 2, we go right to the white. So you have a very nice white snowy flower sitting in the middle. Round 3, I went to the burgundy, so you have a nice bold red framing that. And then round 4 and round 5 are thin rounds, so they create a nice circular border. So round 4, I went back to putty to reflect the center, give some space between the red and the green. And then round 5, I did the green, the Medium Time. And then into round 6, we go back to putty, and we're starting now with the shaping of the hexagon. I think there's like double crochets in there. And then we move to round 7, which is burgundy. So that's nice bold red, framing that as well. And then round 8, 9, and 10 are border rounds again. So round 8, we did the Medium Time, and that's a solid single crochet round, I believe. And then round 9, we went back to the winter white to reflect the flower itself. And round 10, we went back to putty. So the round 9 and round 10 reflect round 1 and round 2 in reverse. So it kind of is a mirror from the center out to the edge. So the pattern for this Wispy Willow hexagon will be out this week, and I'll link to it below as soon as I have it up. So when I'm working on a color, I like to have all my samples set out that I pick and choose. So I have quite a few reds here. I have 2 greens that I'm debating on, and then I have my different whites, and I'll probably use a variety of the whites in there. This is my putty, but this is my nice stark white, and this gets kind of like a soft winter white. And how I do this is when I finally decide on the combination, because I'll lay them out in different arrangements and see what I like and what I don't like. Then I take this, what I call a binder ring. I think that's what they're called at the office supply store. See how it clips together? This is what I will put my samples on, so I know what colors I've decided on. For example, this Wispy Willow hexagon that I have here, I think I've chosen, I'm just going to pull out the colors I believe are in here. This red, this green, this white, and my putty, which is here. These 4 colors are the ones that I chose for this square. So to keep them together just while I get working on it so I know what I'm doing, I take this binder clip, I open it up, and then I just slip these squares onto it. No particular order, or sometimes I do have an order I like. And now I close it up so I don't lose them. And there you go. I have the 4 colors I want, and I can carry this around with me with the project. And another option I will do is take these little metal tags, and I will slip that on here as well. And I will label the tag as to what square I'm working on. Now this tag in particular is called the $Sand Squared, which is not this one, but I would make a tag for this, and I would slip it on here, and then I would have my color combos and the square that I'm working on. And I have a different set for each square that I'm working on so I can stay organized. I've done that before where I've used the wrong color in the wrong square. So maybe I've used bright white for this one and a soft white for another one. And then when I sit down with the square, I just forget and I use the soft white in the wrong place. This lets me remember, this one, this square that I've labeled is bright white, not the other white, not the other square that I'm working on. So these are handy little tools, really simple to find at office supply stores. Again, this is called a binder ring, and this is just metal rimmed tag, I think, and you can get them in many different sizes. One more note about these sample squares. Sometimes I work my ends in on them and sometimes I don't, because I want to see what the texture looks like with the yarn. And sometimes I want to see what the strand of yarn looks like itself when I'm comparing it to my yarn binder. Those samples are in there just as yarn strands. So I will leave the ends out so that I can compare them to my yarn binder. So that's why you see all these ends kind of hanging out on these sample squares. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of inspiration to work with some colors, especially during the holiday season, and gives you some ideas on how to keep your colors organized when you're working on more than one square. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And remember to subscribe to my channel so you are sure to catch all my tutorials as they come out. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.